Prior Art Gallery. My name is Lisa Hoffman, and I am the curator here. We have an exciting programming this year, and thank you to the Tennessee Arts Commission grant for making this possible. We have been able to bring artists in to talk to the students, to talk to the community, and we're so very, very grateful for that. And we're grateful to the Columbia State Community Foundation for making this possible, and especially to Tim for making the time to come and speak with us. I just wanted to give you a brief I cannot forget, Evan Durica and Isaac Hayes, our film crew technology students from the Franklin campus, are here to film for us. They will be helping to create a YouTube video for the college channel. So we love getting students involved. I see professors here tonight. Get your students here, give them that extra credit. I love, love, love having students in the gallery. So now about Tim. He is an amazing, funny artist. We had pizza between the student talk and our talk here tonight with our film crew students, and he has just been a pleasure to get to know. He stumbled upon his dad's 8mm camera in the 7th grade and spent all summer making animated films with clay, sticks, and anything else he could find. His live action films usually starred his younger sisters. I don't know if that was willingly, but his art education was at the San Antonio Art Institute, and he has worked for Disney Feature Animation, Big Idea Productions, DreamWorks Television, Warner Brothers Television, Renegade Animation, Blue Dream Studios, and more. That's just to name a few. What a career. I believe he started in 1985, so he has a lot of great stories. He made a trip to Moscow, Russia for an animated series there, and has a lot of diverse, interesting work that he's going to talk about tonight. Tim's directorial debut at Big Idea, called Lyle the Kindly Viking, won the Best Direct-to-Video Animated Release at the 2001 World Animation Celebration. He was also nominated for Best Vocal Performance in 2003 for his role as Khalil in Jonah, a VeggieTales movie. He also provides lessons at his website, by the way. I encourage you to check it out, timhodgeart.com. And he does has online drawing and storyboarding lessons there as well. But I also want to point out, look around the gallery. Back in the cube, we've got storyboards from his animation. That's how he earns his living. But as any artist, they explore. They like to spread their wings into fine art. So we have a mix of animation art and fine art here tonight. He's exhibited at Lipscomb University with animation artists Tom Bancroft, John Pomeroy, and Scott Salva, all working animation artists. And they all share this interest in fine art. So we will have time for Q&A at the end. So let's welcome Tim Hodge.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the introduction, very kind. I wanted to add too for the awards, they were a long time ago, but the Lyle the Kindly Viking getting the best direct-to-video animated film or animated release beat out Disney's Lady and the Tramp 2. So, if you saw that, I don't know if that's saying much, but still. And the nomination for Best Vocal Performance for Khalil, I did lose that one to DeVay Chase, who had just done the voice for Lilo and Stitch. So I didn't mind that so much. So, but anyway, thank you for coming tonight. And as you can see on the monitor here, a plaque I found a picture of. I was introduced to this phrase when I was fairly young. Ancora imparo. It's Italian. Has anybody heard this phrase before? It's supposedly said by Michelangelo when he was 87. Still, I am learning. And that's why I've kind of adopted that as a bit of a mantra for myself, because I keep learning new stuff, or I keep trying to add to my skill set. And but I want to show you where I started. And this is not going to be a slideshow with a lot of writing, but there is just a little bit more. This is my very first rejection letter from Disney Productions. And back when they were called Walt Disney Productions, not the Walt Disney Company even. And it's this lovely 4-color Fox and the Hound letterhead. This was dated, I don't know if you can read it out there, 1982. I was 19 years old and thought I was ready to work for the best animation company in the world. So I had gathered up what I thought were my best drawings and mailed them. This is not, long before internet. Mailed the package to Burbank, and got a nice letter back. Oh, I also sent a check for return postage, and they didn't cash it. They sent my check back to me. It was very nice of them. But they sent this letter back to this kid and said, "Dear Mr. Hodge, thank you for sending your samples for us to review. The amount of effort that went into your portfolio is evident." And I was like, is that a compliment or not? I'm still not sure. However, your work does not currently show sufficient mastery of life drawing. Try to focus your studies on the fundamentals of good draftsmanship. You might also benefit by drawing more action quick studies rather than static poses. A good drawing has form, spontaneity, rhythm, weight, gesture, proportion, anatomy, and believability. These are things as a 19-year-old I probably should have known but didn't. And they're returning the samples and the check for postage. Best wishes for your future. Don Hahn, Manager of Training and Development. Don Hahn went on to be a producer. He produced such films as Beauty and the Beast, Lion King, and a number of others at Disney. So when I met, because I was on Lion King, so when I did finally get to meet him, I showed him this letter. I made it. I said this is my first rejection letter. My wife and I counted up. I think I had 3 total, because I eventually got in. Like I said, the date on this was 1982. I eventually got in 1992, 10 years later. I kept taking this advice, learning to draw the figure better, going to night classes and taking figure drawing, taking my sketchbook to parks, to the laundromat or whatever. By the way, drawing in a laundromat is really great, because if you're ever worried about people looking over your shoulder, I would sit facing the dryers and look at the reflection in the window and draw the people behind me. It's very clandestine. Now I draw everywhere and I don't care. But anyway, before I got to Disney though, I was working at a very small animation studio in San Antonio, Texas, and I was learning the craft by animating commercials. Some of them turned out really good. Some of them were, it didn't matter because people forgot about him in 2 weeks. It was a great training ground because it was a lot of work. I got to do a lot of steps in the process, not just animating, but I was cleaning up my own drawings. I was painting the cells back when we did that. I was painting backgrounds. Sometimes I even got to run the camera itself when we used film. But this is one of my projects. This is from a television commercial that ran in Boston for a Fox affiliate when they were running the Boston Celtics basketball games. So this was about 125 drawings. And it goes by so fast. It took a couple hours to do, or like a couple weeks, but it was fun. But that was me learning to be an animator. So when I thought I was ready, I started sending my portfolio back to Disney, and finally got them. And this is when they opened their extra studio in Orlando, which is now closed. But they opened a studio at the Disney Image Studios, which is now known as Disney's Hollywood Studios. And they were expanding because they wanted to do feature films down there as well. So I finally got to the point where the training manager, Frank Gladstone, said he wanted to send me a test. So, and the test was taking rough animation drawings that another artist had done and cleaning them up into something that could be seen on screen. So I did that, spent a couple days sending that, sent it back, and called him, and I got put on their hireable. He said, "You're hireable." "Oh, great, I'm hireable. When does that?" Like, it's only you have about 14 or 15 people in front of you. Like, what are their names and addresses? So, but like I said, in 1992, I finally got in and started working. I'm skipping ahead here visually. This is Mulan. The first film I worked on was a short film. It was Roger Rabbit, a short called Trail Mix-Up. It was the last Roger Rabbit short they did. And again, great training ground. I was an in-betweening, cleaning up other animators' drawing. Now, an in-betweener or a cleanup artist, it's their job, and there are hundreds of us, is to make sure all the animators' drawings look the same. You want to make it look like one person did the whole film. You don't want Roger to look different in each scene, because everybody's got a different style. So that was, I was one of those foot soldiers that did that. It's grunt work, but it's artistic and it's fun, and it's at Disney, and I was working at a theme park, and every day at lunch we could go out in the parks and ride Tower of Terror or whatever. But while we were working on Roger Rabbit, and I was wanting to be an animator. I was really, wanting to move up that side of the ladder, and but they were having a problem with it. They said, we don't know how to end the cartoon. We haven't thought of an ending we like yet. So if anybody's got any ideas, send them in. So I went home that night and I drew up a few gags and I gave them to the director the next day. And he invited me to a storyboard meeting with some other artists. And he really liked my work. They didn't use any of my gags, but his name was Barry Cook, and he remembered me from that. So a couple years later, when he got the job to direct Mulan, this is after I'd been an in-betweener on Lion King, he said, Tim, I got an opening, I need another story artist. You want the job? So sure. And the idea was I would go out to LA, I went for like 2 weeks at a time, and I'd work on and then for about 3 months, and then they moved the whole storyboard department to Florida. But I was the only Floridian there. The idea was everybody else would go back after the film, and we'd start a story department in Florida, and I wouldn't be there on the ground level for that. And it worked out really well. But I was like the low man on the low rung of the ladder here. But this is one of the first sequences I got to do, and it was the first sequence in the film. If you've seen Mulan or remember it, it starts off with at the Great Wall of China, where the Huns cross the border, and then start invading China. Well, Shan Yu, which his backstory is he's not a true Han. He's actually was kicked out of China by the emperor, so he's coming back. We didn't want to paint a whole country as bad people, so it was just it was just a personal vendetta on the emperor. So it didn't come across real clear in the movie, but that's true. But anyway, after the Huns cross the wall, we go to the throne room. And if you've seen the movie recently, you realize this is a lot longer than what's in the film. I went very elaborate with it because I really wanted to show off and show the directors I knew my stuff. I did it all in color. Usually you don't go to that extent. Storyboards have to be done very quickly, and usually they're done very many times. I wasn't the first person to storyboard the opening. But the information we needed to get across was, and I was doing it very visually too. I had the map room you see there, and I wanted to show the country and give the audience a sense of this is what you're in for. This is where the Huns came over. This is where they're going to meet, and we're going to lay out the whole story in front of you. But the only information we needed is that Shan Yu is leading the Huns, and the emperor says, no, send people out to meet them. Don't worry about me. So he loves his people. He's trying to protect them. And also when the general says, I think we've got enough men to handle this. We don't need new recruits. And he said, no, go get more recruits, because a single grain of rice may tip the scale. One man may be the difference between victory and defeat. And he said this in this last couple of frames down here. Now in the final film, he says this while he's sitting on his throne. I like this version better, because if you see those mountain range behind him, the idea was, and it wasn't my idea, Barry Cook had come up with this, the director, that we did a cross dissolve after the emperor leaves to that mountain range matched a close-up of a bowl of rice that Mulan was having her breakfast in. And especially, he's talking about the 1 grain of rice. She's eating the 1 grain of rice. She is the 1 grain of rice because she is the difference between victory and defeat. It's a beautiful visual metaphor that we kind of lost, and I missed it, but the film's still great. You never know. Anything else about this before I go on? I don't think so. It was a lot of fun, but anyway. But other moments in Mulan, this is when Mulan gets into the army camp and she's meeting her 3 friends. We call them the Gang of 3, Ling, Chenpo, and Niao. And she's trying to act like a guy, and the dragon Mushu is giving her tips on it, saying, "Oh yeah, smack their butt. They like that." So she smacks the guy's butt, and he's like, "Oh, you're gonna pay for that." And then she hits him, hit him because that's where they say hi to each other. And she's just messing up and stumbling because her guy doesn't know much about it either. And originally in these boards, and this is not all my boards, it's just what I could walk out of the studio with. And a lot of these are my throwaway boards. I redid a lot of this too. By the way, if you see a storyboard with a number in it, like the one upper left, that one was probably actually in the film. If the ones without numbers, I threw away and redid before before we actually got into production. But you see this little scribble note down here. When we were handing off the film to the next department, to the layout department, where they decide, each storyboard panel, they said, like between those first two, they would look at that and say, is that a cut or are you wanting to zoom in? And you'd have to make those decisions in that meeting. So it was like every shot, and it's a long meeting and it's really boring. But it makes the film look better, and you get a more efficient film. But I had this idea in the meeting that instead of Mulan, Yao grabbing her by the lapels and Chen Po coming in saying, "Oh, Mulan, Yao, you've made a friend," that it would be better if we shorten that. And I scribbled it down here. I sent a note to the directors, Tony and Barry. It said when she hits him from into, he does a flip and he lands into Chen Po, and the camera grows over, and it's a better way to introduce a character. We have action, on-screen action, and it's better storytelling for her to introduce another character, or for us to introduce another character that way. And I had totally forgotten about this note. A friend of mine had walked out of the meeting with it. I had a guy who worked in layout, Armand Serrano. Look him up, he's a great artist. He posted that on Facebook a couple years ago. Like, hey, you remember this? I'm like, you found my scribbles. So anyway, that's what goes on a lot of behind the scenes. People think we're doing this and trying to figure out how to put dirty messages in the movies. You don't have time for that. It's all, it's all this. This is during the song Girl Worth Fighting For, which I also storyboarded. And again, I was probably the 5th or 6th person to storyboard it, because anything gets revised totally until it's in production, until it actually goes to the animation department, where it's like, can we make this scene better? Can we make it, make it better storytelling? So it was my turn to redo the song. And this is where Ling is coming out of the water saying, I bet she likes the girls go for a man in armor. And then he's, because he's a real skinny guy, and then he flexes and the water comes out. And I thought that was a funny gag. Bruce Johnson, the animator, actually built on it. He took my simple gag with him walking like this and one flex. He does like 3 or 4 flexes, and the last one squeezes out all the water. So that's another lesson you have, that every department that gets a scene, you're trying to plus it. You want to make it better. Now I had, here's a song. I had to make it as good as I could. It was funny when it left my desk. And you want to inspire the animators. One of the best compliments I ever got was when we would show the film in storyboard form. There's no animation in it. And when somebody sees a scene that I animated, and an animator comes up and said, oh, I want to do that scene so bad. I know exactly how I'm going to handle it. Like, if I can inspire someone to do that. And usually it turns out better. You hope it does, because we had a sign above this, the story department. It was funny when it left here. These are just some random storyboards from Girl Worth Fighting For song, which I was getting better in my sense of composition here. The one on the upper left, you can tell, I wanted to get everybody in there, but it feels a little crowded. I probably could have shifted the drawing, the camera over a little bit, because Chen Po was getting a little to the edge, near the edge of frame, but I was learning still. And I was, it was early in my career, my first foray into storyboarding, surrounded by people who had a lot more experience, and it was very intimidating. And you talk about feeling that artistic inadequacy like we all do. It was, everybody goes through that, and it never goes away. My favorite drawing in here, even though it's the roughest, is it this one, the one where they all look shocked? This is the last storyboard of that sequence, right? They're all celebrating and talking about the girl back home, and they get interrupted by the sight of the burned out village, and you have all this celebration cut by the horrifics of destruction. Oh, there's another little bit. I wish I had kept the boards on it. One of my favorite little bits of this song, I don't know if you remember when near the end where they're all singing and there's a little whistle part. They just go, oh, that's loud, sorry. A girl worth fighting for. And I heard that in the song, and I thought that would be funny if Mulan, because she's feeling real uncomfortable. She's getting surrounded by, this is the most uncomfortable she's felt in the movie, being surrounded by men, and they're all talking about the girl back home, and she doesn't know what to do. And she just does this little, goes the opposite way while they're all marching this way. She just turns around this way, and with that little, and it just felt real good. And the director liked it, and that's when the director was like, oh, I like that gag. And he had never said anything like that before about my work. So I was like, I made Barry happy. This is a couple of boards I use for teaching a lot, because when you're storyboarding, and these are being shown, as an animatic or a story reel, they're just showing one storyboard after another, and we sync it up with dialogue. The audience and the audience being just other filmmakers, you audience never get to see stuff like this. That's the invisible part of being a storyboard artist. Nobody ever sees your work. So this is kind of fun to show it. But it's only on screen for about a second. I mean, it's a lot longer than your animation drawings, which are 1/24 of a second, but still a drawing has to read very quickly. You can't illustrate it lavishly like you would maybe a comic strip or a comic book, where you can have really elaborate illustrations and a lot of detail and a lot of stuff going on, because people are going to look at it for hours. I think of the Sistine Chapel. People are going, well, those individual panels are great story panels, but the ceiling as a whole is not a good storyboard drawing, and there's just too much. You have to be able to take it in 1 second. So the first drawing over on the left is where Mushu is pointing down to her feet, saying, put your feet apart, put your shoulders back, now do the man walk. And as she crosses across the gate here, this first drawing on top, as soon as I did it, I realized I'd done a less than nice drawing, just simply because that line runs right down where the action is happening. But the line of the gate interrupts the connection between Mulan and Mushu, and there's an extra line in there. It kind of interrupts what Mushu's doing. It's just so much line converging. It's hard to tell what the action is. So I did it again. I traced it. I probably could have Xeroxed it and cut it, but anyway. And this is before digital. I couldn't just lasso it and scoot it over. So I redid it and put her totally silhouetted by the shaded door. Oh, I'm putting my hand like here, like you can see it. By this one right here. See this part? But she's totally silhouetted by the door. But also, notice I left her armor white here when she's in front of the white part of the background. On the other side, I shaded it in. That's just to help it read better. I wanted her silhouette and her pose to read quickly for the audience. Now, when this goes to the next department, when it goes to layout, when it goes to animation and the background, they've all got to choose different ways to contrast her against the background. But as long as I make it clear here, that inspires every following department. After Mulan, or actually when we were finishing up Mulan, Mark Henn, who was the supervising animator for Mulan, came to me and asked if I would like to help him with a project. He wanted to do a short film based on John Henry, the American legend, because he loved those really old I'm going to say old films. These are old films too now, but the really the ones that I grew up with, the tall tales and legends like Johnny Appleseed and Paul Bunyan and Pecos Bill. Loved those growing up, and Mark wanted to do one based on John Henry. He said it's a perfect American hero. We never did it. So he asked me to start working on that. He was going to pitch it and see if he could get a budget, and eventually he did. So these drawings are mostly just visual development and just exploring ideas. This was before we had a script or anything like that going on. In fact, except for the one down there in the bottom left with the number on it, that was in the film briefly, but we took that moment out. That was, have you seen John Henry? It's a short, oh, good. Because I didn't think it got a whole lot of release. I think did it ever come out with a live action feature? I don't remember if it did. I did. What did it? Do you remember what it's played with?
I know Terry Crews was John Henry.
No. I'm talking about the animated John Henry. That we,
no. Yeah.
So you didn't see my movie. Out. No, this is just like a 6 minute, 6 minute short. But we had this moment after John Henry thinks he's failed, and we needed Polly, his wife, to come in and inspire him. And I thought maybe she could come up and give him a big kiss, and he should, get all energized. And it wasn't really right. As fun as it was, and I did enjoy the drawing. I thought it looked real good, but we thought it's more appropriate for the story, because at the beginning we talked about how she had his chains forged into the hammer. So it became symbolic. And she hands him the hammer at the end, and somebody one of the other workers throws him another hammer, so he goes after the mountain with 2 hammers. Which, by the way, the whole idea of the steel driving man, this is another lesson I learned in storytelling, that sometimes you have to adjust the facts of a story to make it more truthful in a way, or at least more visual for an audience to get. Because we all know John Henry was a steel driving man. And do you have any idea what steel driving is? It's not real exciting to watch. You know, we have them driving spikes going down a railroad track, and that looks really cool, slinging two hammers. But steel driving is you have one guy holding a long piece of metal, a giant drill bit like this, and another guy with a sledgehammer drilling into the rock so they can put a piece of dynamite in there to blow out. You're literally driving steel. And having a race like that between that and a steam drill, it's hard to see progress. It's not like a race. So we thought we're going to have to fudge what would have been factual, even though this is fairly mythological. It might have happened. We don't know. But so you fudge the facts to tell a better story, but the story's still true, if that makes sense. Okay. So where was I? Oh, these are just some random drawings I did. Oh, this was from production, the one on the bottom where McTavish, I did the voice of McTavish, by the way. Because whenever I pitched the boards, I always gave him a Scottish accent. I was really bad at doing the Scottish accent, but the director liked it and said, "Yeah, who are we going to get to do McTavish?" And first he thought about, I can't remember the actor's name, Alan Young. He did the original voice of Scrooge McDuck. And I think he's still alive. Maybe he can do this. And so I said, why not let Tim do it? So I joined the Actors Union, and I still get about 3 cents a year residuals. So, yeah. But anyway, I did redraw that drawing because we didn't want him to have wearing a shirt, and some more random. These are mostly my roughs. I don't think these are. Oh, I guess there are a couple of production drawings on the bottom. But the one on the far left is where John finishes first. He thinks he makes it to the mountain, but it's not sundown yet. Got to go through the mountain, and he thinks he's gone. He's washed up. He can't do this. And Polly comes back with his hammer. I really do. I enjoyed. I think my favorite one on here. I shouldn't say that. I like all of them so much. Well, I say that. I'm not bragging about my artwork. When I look at them, I get nostalgia. This is like looking at your high school yearbook, and I remember, oh yeah, I remember doing that because Mark did a drawing just like that, and I took that, and it just brings back a lot of memories. And the bottom row is where Polly is saying goodbye to John. His heart's burst. He's going, but when she leans in for the kiss, I didn't like the composition too much. I felt it's a little too close on her. It's cutting off too much of the top of her head, but the moment was right. Because when she leans in to kiss him, that's when we cross dissolve and we pull back and she's with her son. And I'm sorry, I'm getting a little verklempt because I love this part. And of course, she's holding the quilt. We opened the film with a quilt, and all the story point, the prologue to the short film was being told in panels on the quilt, and that's real graphic, stylized style. And it kind of told John Henry's upbringing, and then we catch up to John and Polly after they're married, and then we go into this real graphic kind of a scratchboard style. Look it up on YouTube. It's a really good film. And this is where the ending where she's telling him about his dad. Oh, and then the lightning strikes, and she's like, "Don't be afraid of the lightning. That's just your dad driving steel to glory." I'm like, oh. But it was a great film, and everybody. Well, it was done in the Florida studio, even more so than Mulan, though, because even though we all worked on Mulan, in Florida, and it was like our first feature, this felt a little, I don't know. B animators got to rise up to do A animator work, and everybody got to just do a little bit more than they got to. It was like a temporary promotion. They got to be heads of departments where they wouldn't have been, otherwise. And it was a lot of fun. But, after that, I went on to a film called Brother Bear. Have you seen that one? That was fun. I was on it for about a year, and they weren't even half done by the time I left, because I left to go to VeggieTales. It was a lot of fun. I got a free trip to Alaska out of it. It was about the same time Lilo and Stitch was starting, and I really wanted to work on that one too. And Chris Sanders, who was directing, was a friend of mine, and I talked to him just about the film, not about working on it. But he was telling me how he had written the outline and made it like a children's book. He had illustrated every page, and and he let me look at a copy, which he hadn't let too many people look at it. But he said, everybody wants to come work on this film, and I have to keep turning people away. And I wanted to keep the budget down. I want to keep just a few people. He only let his real close, I shouldn't say friends, but people he knew real well artistically. He liked, everybody was his friend, but he was keeping the crew very small and very intimate for a reason. So much when he explained that to me, I felt scared to ask him if I could work on it because I didn't want him to tell me no. And Aaron Blaise, who was directing Brother Bear, is a good friend of mine, so I knew I was going to have fun on it. Plus a free trip to Alaska, where I lost my wallet, but I got it back. And these are some, if you've seen the film, you may be a little confused by this because there's no raven in the film. Originally there was a raven named Loki. She was the pet of the old woman, the shaman that leads Kenai into, as he's transitions from human to bear. And when Kenai was still human, Loki just squawked and cawed like ravens do. But the old lady, what was her name? Tanana? Does that sound right? I don't remember. Anyway, the old lady, she would talk to him and they'd converse back in speech and animal talk. So you knew that the raven had communication powers. So when Kenai turned into a bear, Loki was the only one he could really talk to. So she was a really great bridge and a kind of a guide for him to accept his new animal body and what the wildlife wildlife, is that the word I'm looking for? How life in the forest was going to be. But she kept, as we were storyboarding it, she kept becoming increasingly unnecessary. We were like, oh, we could let her, well, let's let Tanana do that. And that kept going on till one day we cut her out of the last scene she was in, and we kind of sat there like, did we just kill Loki? I think so. And I missed her because I really like drawing crows, and well, all corvids. Not covids, corvids, crows, ravens, magpies, And also these boards, you might have noticed, are a little bit wider than the others. The drawings are about 30% wider. We were considering doing the film all in widescreen, doing it in CinemaScope, but we kept getting pushback from the executives. No, that's too expensive. Please, it looks so cool. It's such a, it's in Alaska. We got this huge scope of a movie. Like, no, it's too expensive. So we were going back and forth between drawing on paper that was this big and drawing on paper that was this big. Eventually there was a compromise. If you got to see it in the theater, I don't know if it does this on DVD or on Disney Plus, but it starts off in regular 16:9 ratio, like the ratio of this TV. And then when Kenai turns into a bear, the screen widens. In the theater, the curtains, if they still had curtains, would widen, and his scope got bigger. His world opened up more, so it became part of the storytelling experience. So I've got a lot of CinemaScope paper out here. This is a sequence I did from start to finish, and it stayed in the movie pretty much the way I boarded it, which is almost unheard of. And I don't mean to brag about that too much, but when Aaron and I get together or we're speaking someplace, he always brings it up, so I feel okay about repeating my director, because he always brags on me. Like, Tim did the only sequence that stayed the same from beginning to end. And this is when Kenai sets out to kill the bear that killed his brother. I think at this point in the story, though, it was killed his father. We changed it a bit. But my goal in this sequence was to keep Kenai very large in the frame and larger than the bear when he is in pursuit. That top row, you see the bear on the far, is it this drawing? Yeah, the bear is very small. The bear, I don't have all the drawings, but the bear had just come around the corner, so by the time Kenai comes in, he's much bigger than the bear. And there was a few scenes before this, the same thing. The bear would run by, then Kenai would come in, and I always made sure he was larger to give that sense of he's the pursuer. But the moment, in the second row, right around here, when he actually makes contact and his spear goes into her, that's when the tables turn and the bear becomes big and takes up over 50% of the screen. And visually, because there's no dialogue in this scene, I wanted to show how that was part of visual storytelling, where the one who was the threat is now threatened. And anything else about this? Oh yeah, is it this drawing, the one with Kenai's rolling down the back? of the bear. I swear Peter Jackson stole that from me from the second Lord of the Rings movie. With Shelob, and then Frodo rolls down the back of Shelob. It's like, dang it, he stole my storyboards. After mid-production on Brother Bear, I got a chance to meet Phil Vischer, who had founded VeggieTales, and a friend of mine, a co-worker at Disney, had talked to him too, and was like, oh yeah, I think I'm going to go there. And they told Phil, Phil, you should talk to Tim. He'd really be great for your company. So I talked to Phil, and over a couple of months of this, I decided, you know, this seems like a really fun company. It's a smaller company. It's got a really great vision, and I could, and he was like, Tim, I want you to direct. I'm like, ooh, direct? Yeah, that sounds fun. So yes, I climbed up on a higher rung on the ladder, but it was a much shorter ladder than I was at Disney. But still, it was a lot of fun. But the difference was was greater. I was on a TV budget. The films were being done much quicker, and it had to be done, with a lot less redrawing of storyboards than I was used to. And you can even tell the difference between just the staging qualities here, between this storyboard being, the camera's everywhere, it's up, it's down, there's action all around, it's very dramatic, and yeah, there was very little regard for how much it cost, at least from where I stood. And this was very, very, like, no, you're not gonna spend any extra money, we can't afford it. Because also, about the time I changed studios, this was 2000, so the economy was going through a bit of a dip. That's when the housing bubble hit, and when the dot-com bubble hit, and when I had a graph of I'll do it this way backwards, Big Ideas earnings, because after the first couple of films, they kept going more and more and more, and then I got hired here, and then they started doing this. So that was an interesting story that'll take another evening. But this was a fun, this is the Ballad of Little Joe. This is, I think, the third film I directed there. It was a kind of a Western retelling of the story of Joseph and his brothers. And you can see how it's more limited in scope. I staged it more like a TV sitcom. It's much easier and faster to do that way. Like in this top row, how Joseph and his brothers are all kind of facing three-quarter, toward the audience. There's no over-the-shoulder shots. It's just the setups were quicker, and it goes, and it's very entertaining. It's almost like a TV sitcom where everybody sits around one half the table, like nobody does in real life, because there's cameras and there's an audience out there, and nobody can have their back to the camera. So I had to think in that matter, and I had to do more with less. And it was a great challenge, frustrating at times, but it was a fun experience. And again, I got to direct, I got to do voice work, things I would never have gotten to, would have taken me a lot longer to reach that level if I'd stayed at Disney. Wait, I did do a voice at Disney, I did McTavish. Huh. Oh well, I got my 3 cents a year to prove it. This is the second feature we did. I don't have any storyboards from Jonah, at least I couldn't find any. This is The Pirates Who Don't Do Anything. Did anybody see this movie? It was fun to work on, but we were able to make a $9 billion stretch out to look better than it was. But the studio we had in Canada serviced a lot of different studios. They were, I'm trying to remember the other things they were working on at the time, and I can't remember anything. But they had a feature film that they were going to animate and had staffed up for it at the same time as The Pirates Who Don't Do Anything, but that film fell through, and they had already hired a lot of artists. So instead of laying them all off, they thought they'd keep them on and let them work on our film without adding to our budget. So we got the benefit of that, and the film looks probably like at least $20 million budget instead of $9. This is a lesson actually it's kind of a lesson learned for me. I use it in classroom settings sometimes too. It's 3 different ways to stage the same moment. In the film, Paul Grape is very timid, and he's trying to rise up and become a confident person and be a leader. And he needed to approach a bunch of dastardly pirates in a tavern and hire as many as he could. So I needed to get that, find that moment of him confronting them and confronting his own timidity. So I like the top one the best. I have the room full of pirates in the foreground. The image is a little dark here. It looks better in real life. And plus I've got Paul Grape and his compadres back in the background, but they're all silhouetted against the doorway, so it reads pretty well. The middle one's staged a lot more flat, like a Wes Anderson movie, maybe Napoleon Dynamite, just using the silhouettes and the shadows of the pirates. And the one that's kind of a compromise on the bottom, where I get some depth but keep Paul Grape in the foreground, but I don't get to. It's almost staged more TV. He doesn't get to turn his back to the audience as well. And in the top one, it's okay because the pirates are just a mass. They're not really individuals. Speaking of characters, but as much as I like the top one, the director Mike Naraki liked the middle one, and he's the director, so you get your wish. Also, about after I finished, I left a big idea. I started doing freelance for a number of studios. I worked on the new Tom and Jerry show. I've worked on Scooby-Doo. I've worked on Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, and a few others. But also, you remember Netflix, the when it was on DVDs and you get them in the mail? There was like this trend of people who would draw on the envelopes before they send them out and then post them on this web as a blog called Doodleflix. And I thought that looks like fun, so I started drawing on the envelopes too. This is a sample of the ones. Netflix really liked what I did. In fact, they sent me a photo of one of their distribution centers bulletin boards, and they had a lot of mine and other people's envelopes pinned up to the wall. But they liked it so much, they called me and said, we'd like you to design some of our mailers. So this is from different years, but for about the past 10 years, I've been doing their Halloween and Christmas movies. Not every year, but and they usually have some sort of joke on them. Sometimes I like the top two where I took titles and made them dad jokes. But this is one of my favorite ones. I like the story in here with something under the couch, eating their. But again, working with the same tools I had as a storyboard artist, I was telling stories on Netflix envelopes.
Do you have to be a comedian to be an animator?
No. Most of the animators I know are like funny things, but I know some that can't tell a joke. So. Oh yeah, these are the Halloween ones. These are some Christmas ones from different years. This one, actually, I kind of not stole the idea, but I was inspired by an old book. It was not by Dr. Seuss, but it was published by Dr. Seuss. It was by P.D. Eastman, and it was about snow, and it had this little boy and girl playing in the snow, and there's one shot of them with their tongues out, catching the snow on their, in their mouth. So she looks if you ever find the book, you'll see the inspiration. But it took me back to my childhood. Now, as a fine artist, I'm taking everything, like I said, a lot of my inspiration, a lot of my education in storytelling, screen composition finds its way into my art. These are just portraits, but it's all pop art and or pop culture and plays on pop culture. I hope you recognize some of these. Has anybody seen the original Planet of the Apes? Good, such a good movie, isn't it? Thing is, when I do things like this, very few people clamor for it. It's not like something you can really get in many galleries. However, I did sell the goat with the pearl earring to a coffee shop, the Fainting Goat. Oh, yeah. Yeah, they're opening up a new location in Franklin, and I think they're gonna hang it there. Okay. Well, a friend of mine does a lot of the other paintings that are in there. He's another guy I worked with at Disney and VeggieTales, and his name is Jim Elston. So you might want to get him in here. He came with me to the watercolor show. But anyway. More pop culture. This was kind of a companion piece to Chewbacca over there, but this one sold, so I didn't have it to hang it up here. I should hunt down the guy that bought it and see if he wants Chewbacca. But yeah, these are things that inspire me, that I feel that it's fun for me to paint. It's images from my childhood, from things like that. And again, it's hard to bridge that gap into popular galleries. Also, I've been working with the Chuck Jones Center, and they have a charity auction every year, and I do a painting for that, and it always involves, obviously, Warner Brothers characters. But in my love for old, Rembrandt-style art, I've been doing them in more classic styles. when I decided I wanted to get back into fine art, I didn't have a lot of training in oils, so I needed to teach myself, and obviously a lot of YouTube videos. I go to a place up in Nashville, Warehouse 521, where they have figure drawing, painting a couple times a week, but just in technique in general. So I decided to do some master copies, and this is step by step through my. I did a copy of Winslow Homer's The Gulf Stream, one of my favorite paintings, definitely my favorite Winslow Homer. So I bought a canvas that's nearly the exact same size as the original. I think it's like an inch taller and an inch shorter, but it's close. I could have had it custom made, but it cost twice as much, so I got one of the standard sizes. But you can see I gridded off, and I drew the underdrawing, and I toned my canvas, and then I did my tonal, what do you call that? Griselle painting underneath? Anyway, tonal painting. Started putting in my colors, saving the guy on the boat for last, and it's hanging in my living room, so it looks like I have a Winslow Homer. But I think it looks pretty darn close, but it taught me a lot, not only about brush work, but about color, because I was trying really, really hard to get the right color of the sea, and I realized that I went back and looked, what pigments did he have, and I realized he used a lot of Prussian blue, and I didn't have any Prussian blue. That was the secret in this painting. And I found out too, it took him like 10 years to finish it. He did it and then held on to it, and then went and dug back into it and played with it a little bit more. But it's just a wonderful painting. Any questions, by the way? Because I think this is the last. Yep, that's it on my presentation.
We can open it up for Q&A. Don't be shy if you have any questions.
How much time do we have left?
We have, let's say, maybe about 5 to 6 minutes.
Oh, good. I didn't want it to be 45 minutes more and like.
We didn't talk about Moscow.
Moscow. I should, because I'm working on that a lot now. A couple years ago, about a year before the COVID hit, a friend of mine that I worked with at Disney he was from Moscow, and called me up and said, I'm putting on a symposium, what was it called, Global Animation something or other, I forgot. But he wanted me to come and talk about storyboarding. He also invited Aaron Blaise and Barry Cook, who directed Mulan, and Max Howard, who was the head of the Florida studio for a long time, and some other people from other studios I wasn't familiar with. But I got a free trip to Moscow, which was fun, and got to talk about my career in storyboarding. And while I was there, I got in touch I was invited to dinner by a couple people from a studio called Animacord, and they do Masha and the Bear. Not sure if you're familiar with it. It's on Netflix, but in the rest of the world, I hear I'm gonna say it's going gangbusters, but you don't get that reference, do you? No, it's an old radio show reference. It predates me, but.
Viral is the new term, I think. It's going viral.
Okay, yeah, okay, I'll say viral, but anyways, very, very popular. All the kids love it, yes.
What are you doing right now?
Yeah, well, a lot of it is working on Masha and the Bear. I do about three of their episodes a year, just storyboarding, and they send me scripts. They love my stuff, so, and the language barrier isn't too bad because I all speak English really, really well. So.
And then another thing, what do you think about how a lot of animation companies are settling more into 3D instead of the traditional 2D styles? What are your thoughts on that?
I'm glad animation is very popular and still going on. And as far as my job, even if it's 3D, I still work because I'm a storyboard artist. But I really do miss watching drawings move. Actually, I was thinking about that one pretty recently. I wondered, like, when I was 12 and I found my dad's camera and I started animating, I was like, what if I was 12 today? Would I still be excited about animation if it had to be done on a computer? I don't know, because I did that because I love drawing and I love art, and it was a nice, I could draw funny pictures and get paid for it. So I don't know. It was like, animation's great no matter how it's done, but yeah, I think I was more excited about animation when it was 2D, but then again, it might be because I'm 60 now and I just don't want to watch as many kids' movies. So, but I don't know. I still watch. Yeah. I don't have anything against it, but there's a soft spot in my heart for traditional. Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
That,
also, we did about that backlash, because there were people who were kind of, had a problem with the Hodge and, can't think of the name.
oh, Shan Yu?
Yeah,
Yeah, that was, oh, and you're talking about the live action one, or the, okay, I don't,
both, like, in the animation.
yeah, we got less backlash in the 2D one, but yeah, I didn't see the live action one. I was kind of excited about it, but then the more my friends said, yeah, don't bother. But answering your question about research, yeah, we did a lot, and some of it most of it we put into the movie, and we had people on staff that were, a lot of our artists were from China, and I had a good friend who was not like part of that crew, but he had immigrated when he was in his 30s, and he was just an encyclopedia of Chinese history. I mean, it was his hobby. So anytime I had a question, I was like, what do I do here? What would look right? And he would tell me, like when Shang got his promotion and he was in the tent and his dad gives him the sword and it says, Captain, and he gives him the sword. That wasn't in the script. The script just said, I'm going to let you train the new recruits, Captain. And he goes, oh, Captain, I'll make you proud. And I thought, it needs something. We're visual storytellers. It needs to have a visual component. Now, like in an American Army, you'd get little, pins on your collar or stripes or whatever, just so you're a captain. And so I went to David, and I said, "What would a soldier get if he was being promoted?" And he was like, "Oh, well, in such and such dynasty, they would often do this thing where you get an iron tiger that was in half, and it was like a puzzle piece, and you get your orders in it, and then they have to fit to prove they were right." And it was just really involved. And I thought, I can't explain this in like 4 seconds on screen. And or he could give him a sword. Like, start with that next time, thank you. So that whole idea of him giving the sword and then when Shane, he also told me that to touch your head to something is a sign of respect. It's like symbolically like kowtowing, putting your head on the floor. So that was where that came from. So that was historical. But on Twitter, and I think YouTube too, I can't remember her name, but it was a Chinese historian, goes through the animated film and everything we got wrong. And I've answered her on Twitter, like, yep, exactly right. Because like when Mulan was alive, there was no gunpowder. But you can't do a movie set in ancient China and not have gunpowder, so we used it. I don't think the wall existed when that legend came about. So, but it's ancient China, you got to have the wall, so we fudged it. But yes.
Was the jump from like traditional hand-drawn animation to 2D digital animation difficult?
I think so. I wasn't. He was asking about in case you didn't hear, the jump from how difficult was it from the jump from 2D to 3D. A lot of people couldn't really make the jump because that's learning computers is difficult for some people, and you're so ingrained in doing hand-drawn. But I had a lot of friends that did well. They made the leap really easily. But like Mark Henn, who directed John Henry and who was an incredibly gifted and workhorse of an animator, still works 2D. He's still at the studio, and he'll show how the characters need to move, hand animating them, and then the computer animators kind of follow his inspiration. And in fact, I just got a letter from the other. He doesn't do internet very much. So, but he's thinking about retiring now. But as for me, my jump was like changing studios. So I was kind of dumped into it, and I didn't understand anything about computer animation at all. And I just knew you can do anything, right? And then I found out quickly you can't, and it was very frustrating to try to ask. Like, I found out that ropes and strings and things like that are really, really difficult for computer animators, and I'm like, you just draw it, right? Or we were designing a character that had in VeggieTales, that had a feather in his cap, and the engineer that was going to be rigging it said, well, how much do you want that feather to move? I'm like, I don't know, depends on what he's doing. And it didn't occur to me you had to have rigging underneath, that skeletal system inside it but I'm still learning. Back to my show. So.
One more question, and then we'll finish up. Go.
Yes, you've been so patient, thank you.
Yeah, I've just heard a lot of animators tell stories/horror stories about how they work so hard on this portfolio, they give it in, they turn it in, the animate animation company looks through it, and then the pieces that they think are like lackluster, that the artist thinks are lackluster, they pick those, and they seem to pick the ones that you wouldn't expect.
Yeah,
And then,
it's
like
it's
you said,
it's
too,
the
So
yeah.
I was just wondering, like, not like I guess you can't really tell me what exactly they're looking for because each studio company's different. But like, what are the like fundamentals that?
Yeah, it's looking for life, for energy, for storytelling. It doesn't have to be a cleaned up drawing. They want to see loose gesture sketches, at least when I was applying to Disney. And my more polished ones were the ones that got looked over. Like, yeah, anybody can do that. And I want to see action. I want to see, can you show movement in a single drawing? Can you tell a story in a single drawing? In fact, when I was started in the storyboarding department, I was struggling a lot because I was surrounded by people who could do it a lot better than I could and had, a lot more experience. And my drawings were really, really stiff, like that opening thing in the throne room. I like that because I remember it's nostalgic to me, but I also look compared to other people's drawings at the time, like I'm just not getting it. And we were in another story meeting, and it was this flurry of activity where, like, okay, take that drawing, pin it there. It was one of those things you see on the DVD specials where it's all action, and we're drawing. Everybody's working on it. Like, oh yeah, then he does this, and you pin it up, and then we got finished. I don't remember what the sequence was, but once we got done, I said, okay, Tim, it's your finish this, like, clean it all up. I'm like, okay. So I went back to my drawing board. I started drawing, and then Chris Sanders came in, and he had taken one of my drawings that I had pinned up, and it literally took me 3, maybe 4 seconds to draw of Mushu, and it wasn't much more than like an S scribble with a head on it, right? And he showed it to me. No, he didn't bring it to me. He called me at my desk and said, come here. And he went over to the board where I had that one pinned up, and he pointed to that drawing and just said, that's a really good drawing, and walked out. And I was like, what? I've gotten the hold of it. As the months went on, I realized you kind of have to grow into it because I don't know if you can just tell someone what makes a better drawing and then all of a sudden they're better. But yeah, on the Roger Rabbit cartoon, I was cleaning up. Supposed to do a fine line, beautiful drawing. I was cleaning up Alex Cooperschmidt's animation for the last scene in it, and after I did my cleanup, I took it to the assistant who was checking over it because I was in-betweeners under assistant. And as he was looking at it and kind of saying, no, you're losing your volumes here, watch your line quality here, blah, 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 Alex Cooperschmidt walks by and just looks over his shoulder and just says, no, with more conviction. He's from Ukraine, so he has this thick Russian accent. And like, what does he mean conviction? What am I missing? So I went back and I did all the corrections that the assistant did, and 20 minutes later, take it back to Rob, and he's like, oh yeah, much better. And as he's looking over it, Alex walks by again. He said, yeah, that's it, and walks on. And I still was like, what do you mean? Like, I had been there for 2 months, but as the years went on, you catch on. But it is.
Let's thank Tim for coming.
You're welcome.